Hello, I'm your host, Jim Hooker, and welcome to Telling Sandy Stories, as in Superstorm Sandy, that massive storm that hit New Jersey and the East Coast with such great ferocity and tragic consequences 2 years ago this fall. In New Jersey alone, the toll included scores of lives lost, thousands left homeless, and tens of billions of dollars in property damage. In our program, we'll talk with three extraordinarily talented Jersey Shore natives who set out on their own to document in their own individual ways the tragedy as well as the fragile recovery that's still ongoing in many places. Now we'll start with Kevin Burkett, a Manasquan, Monmouth County native and media tech by day at Brookdale Community College, who's among the three joining us. Kevin, your still photography project, Hurricane Sandy, 91 Days, Countless Nights, has garnered widespread recognition for the way it captures the devastation and, in some cases, the hopeful reawakening of a post-Sandy Jersey Shore. Also, Sandy Levine, a freelance television producer and Toms River native, who's completing a gripping documentary on the superstorm, and Justin Osiello, a native of South Seaside Park in Ocean County and an urban planner by trade, whose Facebook page, Jersey Shore Hurricane News, played a key role in Superstorm Sandy coverage, at one point even being commandeered by state emergency management officials for bulletins and ultimately receiving a White House citation. Welcome to you all, and thanks for joining us and agreeing to come in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here.
All right, so one thing that struck me with all three of you is that you each had your own way of dealing with the crisis and the tragedy in terms of telling a story, or communicating what happened and what's still happening, in fact, with the wider audience. And so why don't we start by going around the table and getting an idea of each of your projects. And why don't we start with you, Sandy? Tell us about your documentary, Heartbreak and Healing After Sandy, briefly, and the story you're telling there.
I started wanting to shoot what was happening in my community shortly after the storm happened. I was sort of compelled to pick up the camera. And I've just been recording stories and images for almost 2 years now. And it's turned out to really be a story about recovery, and in many cases, a very, very slow recovery, and all the stress that's caused on the community, and also how some people rose to the top to become volunteers who really made a difference in helping people when they were at their lowest point. So it's heartbreak and healing. There's tragedy, and then there's some positives as well.
All right, and we look forward to seeing an outtake, as we said at the top, in a little bit there. So Justin, tell us about your Facebook page, Jersey Shore Hurricane News, and its beginnings, which predated, as I understand, Sandy, but took off once Sandy hit.
Sure. So this page began in August of 2011, and it was created in the days before Hurricane Irene. I wanted to create really a platform where people are on Facebook. Everyone nowadays is on Facebook, and even 3 years ago they were there. The whole intention was just essentially to get people real-time information, but also to connect them and also help them kind of report the news and tell the story as it was happening. And really the whole genesis comes from when I was about 5 years old. In Seaside Park, the fire siren would go off, I'd hop my bike and I would chase down fire trucks. And the love of news has really followed me to this point.
And yet you became an urban planner. We'll get into that maybe a little bit later when we talk more in depth about your particular project. For now, Kevin, how about your project, Hurricane Sandy, 91 Days, Countless Nights. What's your aim with your photography on this, which I understand is ongoing even as we tape here today?
Yes.
And I should note you credit your wife, Shannon Welch, as an equal partner in this,
Yes.
who's here in the studios today watching and looking on.
I think with my project is a little bit different than a video project or an urban planning project in that I used to work for a website, and I was tasked with going out and reporting what happened after Hurricane Sandy almost every day. And then my ability to get into areas was restricted, even with the press pass. So I decided to wait till the restrictions were lifted and then go out late at night when people were sleeping, when people were not thinking about the storm. And the concept behind my project was when people go to bed, they think happy things because they don't want to be dealing with the world that is around them. So I took pictures that reminded us that even as we sleep, we still deal with these images far and wide. And I traveled from Manasquan to Union Beach several times, and I worked from Bay Head all the way down to Manahawkin and down to Toms River and to Ortley Beach. And I'm continuing to shoot. I shoot at least one night a week to this point, and my idea is to let us know that it's still happening, but to tell the story at night, because at night things
Don't go there yet. We'll go there in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
We don't want you to tell your whole story. We want to keep the viewers with us a while and leave them something to
I
go for a
apologize.
little bit later on. Yep. So you all did, however, what we're hearing here is that you all felt driven to communicate, to make something of this monstrous storm, its aftermath, which may be the worst ever to hit New Jersey in recorded history, right? As far as I know, as far as we know. So why don't we take a look at a clip from Sandy Levine's documentary before we go on, and let's roll that clip now.
Waterfront lots sit vacant where homes once stood that were too damaged to salvage.
There's a lot of houses that have been torn down. Yeah, where the people, they just can't rebuild.
Brand new homes perch on pilings, presumably higher than any floodwaters to come. Concrete symbols of hope, tall and strong, surrounded by hidden damage in structures virtually untouched since the flooding, in some cases contaminated with dangerous mold and dragging neighborhoods down.
The neighborhood's still a mess. Many of my neighbors, empty lots. They're all still waiting to do something.
I'm Sandy Levine, born and raised at the Jersey Shore and still living in Ocean County, smack dab in the middle of some of the areas hardest hit by Superstorm Sandy. In an upcoming documentary, Heartbreak and Healing After Sandy, we'll celebrate the tremendous progress made in cleaning up after the disaster and explore the daunting challenges remaining for the people and places forever changed after a monstrous storm barreled across the region October 29, 2012.
Governor Christie has declared a state of emergency. This directs the mandatory evacuation of the barrier islands.
As the months turn into years, an uneven recovery is underway from an epic catastrophe that some predict may happen again.
These storms can be expected, and I think perhaps one of the take-home points here is that we're primed for more storms.
In the wake of Sandy, we'll see how businesses are faring that were crushed by the ocean and witness the storm's heavy environmental and emotional toll. This marsh is much more than a debris-ridden eyesore. It's a graveyard of precious keepsakes for people who have lost nearly everything.
75% of my house is over here in pieces and personal belongings, and I felt responsible that I need to help clean up and hopefully find other things that I can take home with me.
We'll meet families tearing down the damage to mark the start of a new life.
We're hoping to rebuild. You know, as soon as we get some estimates on the cost, that's what's going to be the key on whether we can rebuild or not.
A full year and counting after the storm, others are stuck in a holding pattern, mired in red tape.
We've just been fighting with insurance companies, grants that are not available. We're waitlisted for a lot of grants. There's still thousands of people, myself included, who are still homeless and still waiting to go home.
How many homes have been razed to this date, 4 months later?
Confusion and anger over rebuilding requirements and insurance hikes turned residents into activists. Community and faith-based groups banded together to bolster the healing, with strangers coming in from across the country to clean up the mess. Compassion became a calling for some selfless volunteers.
I was compelled to help my community. I knew that I had seen other disasters where it seemed like people were kind of left out in the cold, and I couldn't bear to have my hometown be part of that. We've been in Ortley since the first day they stopped busing people in, and we'll be here till people don't need us anymore.
Mayors facing unprecedented challenges will share lessons learned. We'll see how Herculean efforts repaired much of the iconic seaside boardwalks in time for the first post-Sandy summer season. Then tragically, less than a year after the storm, a horrific second blow
almost too much to bear.
I own the Carousel Arcade up here. I lost half of it during Sandy and I lost the other half in this fire.
Life after Sandy has been an emotional roller coaster. Today, we'll look back at the beginning to take stock of progress made and forward to the future as we brace ourselves for the massive amount of work still to come.
Well, for a full recovery, it's going to take 10 years just to reestablish infrastructure, schools, homes, roads, electric, sewage, water. All of that has to go back in. In some cases, the requirements for rebuilding are going to change, and when that happens, everything else has to change with it. So, I mean, 10 years for a full recovery, that's not an unthinkable thing.
Some really powerful stuff you captured there. I think we can all agree, right?
I agree. Absolutely.
Sandy. And you said, you're welcome. You said before we went to that earlier, you said you felt compelled to grab your camera. You've been in television for
30 years.
30 years. And so, what were you doing when we talked earlier, you and I was asking, did you just wake up one morning and have to grab your camera and go out? I hear that you had some tape there from the governor ordering an evacuation beforehand. Of course, you could have gotten that later, but...
I did get that later. But I, like so many residents of the area where we live, we didn't really know, maybe Justin knew what was going on right from the beginning, but we certainly, in my household and my immediate neighborhood, we didn't really know how bad it was right in the beginning.
And you live a couple miles inland or
I
so?
live in Toms River, which is just over the bridge from Seaside.
Right.
And we had no power, and you don't realize when you have no power how cut off you can really feel from the outside world. We had our smartphones, which we were trying to keep charged. And as I know, we'll get to it in a little while, the way most of us found out what was going on was through the internet, including Jersey Shore Hurricane News, began posting stuff about what was happening. But we were told that you weren't supposed to be out on the roads, and I was obeying that. I didn't immediately go out. And there was some flooding in my neighborhood. My own house didn't flood, but there was some flooding. And it was just it was a little scary. I mean, your supermarkets were closed, the banks were closed, everything was closed. And we were told to stay off the roads. So
I mean, not to immediately, we're going to have another show in a little bit about safer building and things like that, but you may have done the right thing there because a lot of folks were killed by drowning and going out or fallen tree limbs and the like, so you may have done your family a favor by staying in.
I was a little worried about live electric wires being in the water. And
Right.
also there
That type
were
of thing
so
also.
many trees down,
Yeah.
it wasn't that easy to get around. But so it was a little while before I got out and started shooting, but not too long.
But you have a history of this kind of thing. Your husband, Michael, recovery from a rare life-threatening medical condition. You grabbed a camera.
It's true.
When we worked together at New Jersey Network for a period of years, you did a beautiful story on your own about a goose that had an arrow pierced right through it, and I think your dad, the veterinarian, did. So, these are the kinds of stories. You go ahead and get them, but what would you say your Sandy story has in common or is like other stories, or is so much unlike anything you've ever done before?
That's an interesting question, but you're right. In those other two instances you named, I felt compelled. That is a common theme. I couldn't not do it. I had to do it.
And the same with this one?
Yes, same with this one. And as you became aware of just how devastated the area was, it just seemed like something that I needed to see myself, record, preserve for history, and I knew that there would be incredible stories to tell.
Can you give us an exact day of when you said, maybe, I'm sure everyone was home, Michael or your husband or, daughter Carolyn, I got to go out. Mom's taking her. Can you give us the day of the epiphany when this happened? That you shot some beautiful stuff there.
Thanks.
You shot it all yourself.
Yes,
amazing.
I shot it all myself.
You got the jet star, as you said, the roller coaster in the ocean, iconic.
Well, my own father's house flooded pretty badly. He got 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water throughout the entire first floor of his home. And at the time, I guess he was 84. He's a little older now, but I went to see him to see if he was okay. And the water had receded, but what you don't realize when you hear, oh, my house flooded, it leaves a mess. There's a black, silty muck from the river and the bay that's left. And there's an odor to it when it comes into your house. So you really want to that's why everybody put everything out on the curb, because it was ruined. So when I saw my own father's house, I realized I had to shoot everything there. And just one thing led to another. You couldn't go 5 feet in those early days without talking to people about how much water did you get? Did you flood? Did you not flood? Did you have power? That's all people were talking about. So I just started taking a camera sort of around with me everywhere I went.
Wow. And you put some of those in the doc, some of those early interviews as well?
Put them out on the internet, do you mean?
They're in the documentary, some of those earliest interviews that you have?
Sure. Well, yeah, I've shot a lot of footage, and unfortunately I have to whittle it down.
Well, what struck you most about the folks you talked to in the immediate aftermath and then even months later?
Well, I think we were naive in the beginning that the recovery was not going to take so long. I think people were very eager to get back to normal right away. And I have to laugh about this now, but it took a little while for me to get over to the barrier island, because it was restricted. And I remember saying early on, I got to get over there, otherwise it's going to all be cleaned up before I get to see it.
Interesting.
And, if you go over there now, and we're coming up on 2 years, there's still areas where they're not at all cleaned up.
One other thing on this before we get to the other guys here with us. It strikes me that your name is Sandy. I know that hasn't been. So you share the name to, that this storm that laid waste to your beloved shore, the Bruce Springsteen, the boss, the king of the shore, he has that song, 4th of July, Asbury Park, Sandy. Any thoughts on having the name now after, it's sort of like after a Katrina, if you share that name, now you have Katrina. What is it like?
It's an interesting question. It's not great to have that name and to also be approaching people who are devastated by the storm and saying, hi, I'm a television documentary producer. I'd like to know if you'd like to be part of my project. I'd like to interview about the storm. My name is Sandy. And you can see the look on their face.
Wow.
Yeah, it has a very bad connotation for people. And I always...
How are you carrying it now?
I bring it up right away and I say, I apologize for my name when I talk to storm victims. I really do. And they laugh about it. I mean, there's nothing I can do.
It's an icebreaker that way.
My real name is Sandra, so if somebody's super sensitive, I say I'm Sandra.
Sandra, there you go.
Use that.
Okay. Well, Kevin, let's turn over to your photography project for a moment, from video to stills, which you mentioned earlier about the difference there. And now, Sandy was almost immediate in terms of her getting out there, and you were a month or so after, I think I read. So take us through how you decided to pick up your camera to document the aftermath. You were equally compelled.
In a way, I've been doing media since I've been 7 years old. I've been in the media business, in grade school, elementary school, middle school. I've been doing some sort of photography or some sort of video production. And it just seemed natural that I have a really good camera and that I have the desire to tell a story. I just didn't know what that story was. And I got tired. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but we were adversely affected in Manasquan, and I got tired of hearing the stories. So I wanted a story that I could tell.
You got tired of hearing which stories? Of Ocean County or a different barrier island area?
I would go out and it would upset me to hear people who lost their houses.
Okay.
And it bothered me, and it still bothers me to this day. And I felt that I have a talent that I wanted to share, so that's why I started shooting at night, because I could go out, I could go undercover, I could shoot the hard pictures and get the pictures that I wanted to take and tell the remaining story at night and had very little interaction with people. It was a completely different approach.
I got to hear more on that. What do you mean? Why did you want to have very little interaction with people?
I just wanted to tell the story after dark, and I didn't want to justify why I was walking up someone in a public space with a camera and taking a picture that took 15 minutes long to produce. I just wanted to go out there and just take a picture and make something.
So it didn't have to do with the artistic sensibility of After Dark?
No.
Because in fact, many of your pictures have a lot of light on it, and we can pop some up when we're ready. But we see one over here. That looks like almost daytime, or at least twilight. But
that's all the pictures are taken after 10 p.m.
Okay.
Every picture is taken at night, and what I did was, technically speaking, I used time. The longer the time was open, the more light would come across, and it would produce more visible parts of the picture.
The exposure, I read, I
exposure,
think, on
very,
your
very
website.
long exposure. So in a way, for me to deal with this project was I needed something cathartic, and I needed to explore what was happening because I was very hurt by what happened with Hurricane Sandy. You know, my hometown of Manasquan, where I lived, was completely obliterated. You know, and farther south was even worse. In Manalocan Bay Head, Seaside Heights, and Portland Beach, those areas were really inundated as well. So when I realized that I couldn't tell the story that I wanted to tell during the day, I shifted up and I went out at night because I just didn't want to be around a lot of people. I just wanted to tell the story of what's happening at night, to say, here's what's happening after you go to bed, it still remains.
And as it happens, you don't have, I think your website says, and there we see another, that's an eerie one, I think a lot of folks would say that we're looking at there.
Yeah, it is.
But you don't have a single person in your pictures,
No,
although I thought I saw an elderly man in a rowboat, and I'm not trying to make a joke here, on the beach in one of your pictures.
I don't
Maybe
remember
I just
that.
didn't have
I don't
it big
remember
enough.
that picture. I tried not to have any person or persons in the exposure.
So there's no people in these pictures,
purposely,
and why
yes.
is that?
I was trying to let the pictures be.
There's the flooded, which town is that?
Yeah, that's in Seabright.
Seabright.
That was actually taken early in the morning, right before sunrise. I was doing an event in Seabright. The reason why there's no people in the photos is because I want the devastation to speak. I want there to be a certain timeless feeling toward what happens or what, it's even upsetting me now. Ultimately, I just didn't want to have people in the story because people aren't the focus of this project. The focus is the structure, the focus is the devastation, the focus are the houses. I had rules. I had very strict rules with this project. If there's a light on in the house, if I could see a person in the house, I don't shoot someone's house if someone's home.
I saw that. You even wrote on your website that if you don't want your house there, I'll take it off. I'll never publish anything that anyone
I try to be
doesn't want.
100% respectful of the people. This project is not to make anyone feel worse than we already are. This project is literally to look at the fact that we can still go to places that are still adversely affected by the storm to this day, and that at night when you go to bed, you might have had the best day in the world, but that house or that structure or that lot may still be empty. And I just found a calling to document as many of those places as I possibly could.
Let me throw two of your quotes at you
Sure.
that I've read in either your website or other folks interviewing you. You said this was, at one point, you were quoted as saying, this was an artistic attempt to understand the tragedy.
Yes.
Which I think you're getting to in some respects here. And also that the charmed culture of the Jersey Shore was being transformed, and you wanted to document that. So it's being transformed, I'm going to presume then, for the worst, the much worse?
I'm not looking at it.
Don't you know yet?
I'm not looking at it as positive or negative. I'm
Okay.
just saying that we're seeing a change. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, especially in Manasquan where I grew up, because I'm used to the small cottages. I mean, you know, where I live is a very small house. It's a summer cottage. It's where I live. And now when I go down to the beach, you know, I make a right and I go down Ocean Avenue or First Avenue, and I see big houses being lifted 20, 30 feet in the air. To me, it's not the same. It's not that it's bad, it's not that it's good, it's just not the same. And I wanted to take a picture of that just to have for my benefit.
Before we go on to Justin also, let's hear from all three of you while we're at this particular subject. Well, we've already heard from Kevin, but Sandy and Justin, what do you guys think about the new look of the shore? And let me just interject this. I remember a while back, the New York Times wrote a story about the cookie cutter homes that were going up, which I happen to agree with. You no longer have the slamming screen door of grandma's house, you know, or the uneven front porch, you know, you have these big mansions. But now we have another type of thing going on here with the raising of the homes and maybe a lot of grandma's screen porches being replaced forever. But what do you guys think, you two?
Go ahead, Justin.
I think the character has certainly changed, right, of the shore. I think people are realizing that this is sustainability. I mean, it's either do or die. You know, we're hearing all these warnings from climatologists and environmentalists that Sandy was a nightmare and it could be happening again in the future. So, on the other hand, people are saying, well, I don't like the look now. A little bungalow sticking up in the air doesn't really make much sense to me. But on balance, people really see that this is something that that really needs to change.
What do you think of the look when you go around there?
I mean, I'm a bit indifferent. I kind of see it from the standpoint that it's necessary. I'm seeing it more from the functional standpoint as opposed to the aesthetics.
Thanks. Sandy?
I remember when we first started talking about the fact that houses would need to be raised on pilings, I thought, oh, that is going to be so freakish. You know, that's going to just be horrible. We'll never get used to that. And I remember the first house I saw that was up on pilings. It looked very strange, and you're starting to get used to it. It's going up all over. Yeah. What's stranger now, and sort of still very sad and tragic now, is you see houses that are lifted on pilings next to a house that's still all crumpled up that hasn't been touched yet, next to an empty lot. And that's on every single street in the communities that have been devastated. You see great progress, but then you see no progress, and then you see this middle area where there's an empty lot, which means either the house washed away completely or the house is destroyed and the people have taken it down, but they're just not ready to rebuild, or they haven't decided whether they're going to rebuild. So it's this mixture on in every neighborhood of the places that were affected. Yeah. But we're getting used to the houses on pilings.
Is the other, it seems like you're saying it's somewhat unnerving to see this type of a landscape out there.
It's just you feel
what
daily.
Used to be happy-go-lucky Jersey Shore families.
Transition. We're in a very clear state of transition, and Kevin? It's visible.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I think that from my work for the past year and 10 months, or whatever, however long it's been, just wanting to document this change and do it in an artistic way, I think, and being indifferent. I just see it as just change, and I think in a way we're forced into it. I don't think we're ready for it, but we're forced into it, especially if we want to have sustainability.
Interesting stuff, just what Justin said also, and I'm sure Sandy agrees. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Justin, we haven't forgotten you. We're going to get to your Facebook page. We're going to talk about that, so stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.